Jai Hind friends, continuing with the series, let us take 10 more questions, multiple choice questions to learn little more about the system of governance in India, that is Indian polity. Do keep a copy of the Constitution of India accessible as you proceed, and I will be referring you to it time to time. Also, I recommend that as soon as the question is displayed on the screen here, you pause the video, take a maximum 1 minute to mark your answer and then proceed to listen. That I think is the best way to evolve learning and thinking power. All these questions are available on the Telegram channel as a quiz and downloadable PDF files. The quiz will resume with more questions in about 2 weeks from now. So do join the channel if you so wish. The link is in the description of this video. And with that, let's take the first question. Which of the following statements is or are correct regarding the governor of a state? The first statement says the governor shall make and subscribe an oath in the presence of the Chief Justice of the High Court of the state, or in their absence the available senior most judge of the High Court. This is all very clear. If you see in Article 159, it says that, and otherwise also I believe it comes from general common sense, which you must have developed by now, that this will be a correct statement definitely. Secondly, it says during a vacancy in the office of the governor, the functions shall be discharged by the Chief Justice of the High Court, or in their absence the available senior most judge of the High Court. Normally if you try and relate this with the idea of the president, we know when the president's office is vacant, then the duties are discharged by the vice president of India, and if the vice president's office is also vacant, then it is discharged by the chief justice and then the senior most judge of the Supreme Court. But in the case of the states, the judges of High Court, etc., there is no such provision in the Constitution. So this is actually not correct, because it says shall be discharged. There is no such necessity. In fact, if you read Article 160 of the Constitution, it very clearly says that the President may make such provisions as he thinks fit for the discharge of the functions of the governor in any contingency that is not provided in this chapter, which is the chapter of the state executive. So, generally what happens, practically also if you see, you don't see the Chief Justices discharging the duties. It is one of the nearby state's governor who's given additional charge on a temporary basis. So yes, this second statement is wrong. Again, nothing too big. Straight provisions from the Constitution. No necessity of really, applying too much mind, etc. So I believe such questions should definitely be, done well. But the performance is somewhere poor, because we tend to read only books and not the actual Constitution, and that's why I'm trying to force you. So I request you please read 159 and 160. They're just few lines. It's not too much of a time-taking exercise, and even if it is going to help you. So the picture there, the anonymous mask, very popular, also called the Guy Fawkes mask. You can pause, read, improve your learning and understanding of how the world is functioning in general. We move on to the next question. In which of the following situations the President of India may decide who shall preside over the sitting of the House? And some situations are given for the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. See, we have had a similar question earlier also, though that was very specific to the Lok Sabha only, and the idea of Speaker pro tem, if you remember, right? We had talked about it in detail, how many people are confused with the idea of pro tem as only the one who is appointed temporarily after an election, right? So we have discussed all that. Please check those videos out for more details, and I hope you remember. And that is the core idea to understand also, that the President's role in these situations comes only when there is a vacancy in both the houses. Okay, understand, only when there is a vacancy in the presiding officers and as well as the deputy presiding officers' chairs. Okay, both should be vacant, because otherwise, if only one of them is vacant, then the other one will always be there to preside over. Or even if there is absence of both, but there is no vacancy, then one from the panel of chairpersons will preside, right? So the correct answer here should be very simply 1 and 4. When there is a vacancy in the office of Speaker, Deputy Speaker, and there is a vacancy in the Chairman and Deputy Chairman of the Rajya Sabha as well, right? What I find slightly unnerving is that even though we are working with principles and it is just an extended question that has come earlier also, yet less than half of the respondents actually get it right. So it's like I question that, are we improving? If I just ask the question in a slightly different way, I expect a better performance, but it doesn't happen. Maybe the same people are not attempting. Okay, I mean, but I believe they are. And that is what I felt, that I shall be explaining the answers and not just give a PDF with lot of written material, because people don't develop any understanding out of it. Improvement in learning has to happen, and hence I sincerely recommend you to systematically learn things. As in, do not just give random tests and watch random videos here and there. Give tests and read material and watch videos. Do all of that as a complete package, right? Only then your learning can improve. See, if you just watch this one video, you will get perhaps little bit of answers here and there. But if you are following it as a sequence and you make a mistake, you get it right, then you again make a mistake, you get hammered, then you again make a mistake, you learn further. That's how we improve. So it has to be taken like that, right? And any further test of understanding, you should start feeling, you must have realized that if you don't understand it properly, any twist and turn in the question starts creating confusion. Okay, I hope you got the point. Anyway, let's move on. So that flag there, that's the popular nowadays as the gay pride flag. Please mind it, it's not 7 colors, it is 8 colors, and each color has got a meaning. Pause, spend time to understand, and then go to the next question. That is, which of the following symbols are protected, not these two, okay, under the Prevention of Insults to National Honor Act 1971. Okay, so there is an act by this name, and it's just hardly one page. It's not that big an act. So I would recommend that you just quickly read it as well. If nothing else, then just as a citizen of India, you should know about this. So if you see this act, it has the national flag, the constitution, and the national emblem. The national anthem. The emblem is not there. For that, there is another act, which is the State Emblem of India, Prohibition of Improper Use Act 2005. Okay, the State Emblem of India Act, Prohibition of Improper Use. So that deals with the state emblem, because that's where the official use of these symbols are allowed, whereas the other three are actually more open to be used by even the citizens in different way. So that's why they are not in the same act. If you just apply little mind here, you will realize that it's not really going to be in the same act, all of them. So these three are there, and these symbols here shouldn't have been difficult to recognize, right? That's the Mars and Venus, and with evolution of our society, we have moved beyond the binary understanding of genders. So if you superimpose both of them, if you superimpose, it becomes something like this, and then you mix both of them as well. So like this becomes the symbol for the transgenders as well. Anyway, let's go on to the next question, and that is, which of the following statements are correct regarding an appropriation bill introduced in the Parliament of India? Okay, it can be introduced only in the Lok Sabha. Absolutely correct. See, appropriation bill is nothing but a money bill. So all the conditions that we know of money bill will apply, and hence the first statement definitely is true. Second, it contains all the demands for grants voted upon by the Lok Sabha. Absolutely correct. So an appropriation bill is introduced after the general discussion is over, and the voting has also been completed on the demand for grant, the DGs, right? So once the voting is completed, thereafter it will be introduced in the Lok Sabha. And and for this reason only, after it is introduced, no more cut motions are allowed. Okay, it cannot be introduced, as they were allowed in the voting phase itself, right? So once the voting has been completed, then it is drafted all together as an appropriation bill, and at that stage no cut motion will be allowed. Okay, so that fourth statement is also correct. Then appropriation is the finalization of all the approvals of parliament regarding the monies to be used by the government. So the demand for grants that were passed and also the charged expenditure, right? Because ultimately this is all what the parliament has authorized. So they all form the part of appropriation bill. Please be very clear about this. Never be confused. Charge expenditure does not form part of just the demands for grants. It is not part of the demand for grant when the amounts are voted upon, but it will be part of the appropriation bill. Okay. So please do not be confused in this area. I know these are slightly technical, financial management topics, and a lot of confusion remains. I am trying to put up a sequential procedure of how the budget is made, but that will take some time and it will come out. So don't worry about that, but please be sure in what I just told you. So all these statements are correct. And with that, let us go to the next question, and that is, which of the following rights are available only to the citizens of India? Okay, so right to vote, we don't even have to talk about it. We all know the provisions of the constitution, the provisions of the statute, that is the RPA, which actually gives the right to vote. It always talks about the citizens, so this is available to the citizens. Then a right to information. This is where some confusion is bound to happen, and that's the fun part. I mean, if there's no confusion, no thinking required, what's the fun of this exam after all? So, right to information is a fundamental right, we all know, and it is read under Article 19 and Article 21 of the Constitution of India. Now, see, Article 19 is available only to the citizens, right? Whereas Article 21 is available to any person. So, if we just try the logic, then it appears, that, then right to information should be available to non-citizens also, because it comes under Article 21. But see, that will be a very, very limited, kind of an understanding of right to information for the non-citizens. Also, we know that RTI Act, which is a very specific right to information from the government, RTI Act is also only for the citizens, right? So the broader concept will always be applicable to the citizens. Of course, if there is an issue with the non-citizen, then the courts will uphold the right to information for them as well, but in a very limited way. Right, in a very, very limited way. For example, they will not have any right to information under the Right to Information Act, because that is specifically for the citizens. So, considering all of that, again, as I told you earlier, generalized approach of answering. I realize some people are not getting this idea of what is generalized and what is technical. See, go and listen to the video again. I did not say that don't mark technically correct answers, right? And generalized understanding doesn't mean what you think is generalized. Okay. Generally speaking, we will say that India is a unitary country. No, that is not a generalized understanding. Okay, even though you may feel like that at times. So, what is generalized and technical? You need to evolve, and that's where the context also comes in. So, anyway, in that background, again, this should also actually be correct. That in a broad understanding, it is available to the citizens. And the right of the children for free and compulsory elementary education. If you see Article 21A, as well as the Right to Education Act, everywhere it does not discriminate between a child who is a citizen of India or not. So this is not just for the citizen. This is actually for every child in the country. So 1 and 2 should be the correct answer. We go on to the next question, and that is, which of the following political parties are eligible for exemption from income tax under the Income Tax Act? So the political parties that are registered with the Election Commission of India are exempt from paying income tax under the Section 13A of the Income Tax Act of 1961. As long as the political parties file their income tax returns every assessment year, okay, along with their audited accounts, income expenditure details, balance sheet, etc. So they have to file returns, but all registered parties with Election Commission can gain this benefit. Other options are just randomly created there. This is actually something you should it's more to teach you also. Also, now that I realize the kind of performance we have displayed here, some fundamental features of RPA are not very clear to us. Anyway, now you know. So let's go to the next question. Which of the following are a discretionary power of the President of India? Now recall, whenever we have had these kind of questions, I've told you that, see, my first instinct will be, boss, President has no discretionary power practically. It's only the rare situations which we should have on our fingertips also, that when the President will have a discretion. So my first instinct will be none of this is a discretionary power, but I'll just check. If those special weird cases are there, rare cases are there, then I will try to check. But otherwise, my first instinct will be the answer is none of these, even without looking at the options. But I'll still go through the options and see. Summoning a session of Parliament. No, this is not that rare event where the discretion is required. It will be done by the President of India on the advice of the Council of Ministers. Of course, if the Council does not give advice and 6 months are over, but that's a very specific situation, right? Again, this is where the generalized answer that, those exceptional cases which have anyway not happened any time. But as a general rule, summoning is done on the advice. So this is actually not a discretionary power. Removing a minister of the union against whom there are allegations of corruption. First, President does not remove on discretion. Second, on allegations of corruption. It's just an allegation, it's politics, the opposition will put allegations against everyone. They don't even leave the Prime Minister at times. So these allegations are not really any ground to remove anyone, and even if it is removed, it will be a decision of the Prime Minister to recommend to the President. So this is also not a discretion. Then it says presidential reference to the Supreme Court of India, Article 143, if you can recall. See, presidential reference is again nothing but the government's reference. Okay, so this is actually again done by the government only. Government seeks opinion of the Supreme Court on matters of law. Okay, so this is also not a discretionary power of the President, and good number of you got it right, so good, not bad. Okay, so next question we have is, which of the following are the functions of the Principal Secretary of the Prime Minister? If you recall, in the very last video we had the question on Prime Minister's office, and I did tell you to read quickly about the Principal Secretary, and I even explained to you what they do. So that's what I mean, that if you watch the videos as a series and you follow what I'm telling you, your learning is going to skyrocket. But if you just do random things, nothing systematic, then what's the point? So, we did talk about it yesterday, the previous video. Please look at that. And let's look at these options here. Heading the Central Secretariat. No, that's the job of the Cabinet Secretary. Okay, Cabinet Secretary is the head of the Central Secretariat. Then assisting the Prime Minister in his responsibilities as the head of the Union Cabinet. No, that is again the job of the Cabinet Secretary. Okay, and that's why the name also Cabinet Secretary. So assisting the cabinet or the cabinet's head's work, that is purely, that is not the work of a Principal Secretary. See, understand it in simple terms, that the Principal Secretary is essentially looking after the work which belongs to the Prime Minister. So yes, the public relations of the Prime Minister, liaising with the President, governors, foreign representatives, etc. Right? For example, you remember the duty of the Prime Minister to inform the President. Ultimately, it will all be looked after by the Prime Minister's office, which is headed by the Principal Secretary. Please do watch the video of the last the last video just before this one. You'll learn a bit more. So otherwise this question was not that difficult, I believe, and hence 3 and 4 should have been the correct answer for you. But so again, I really hope once we touch 400 and then I resume the quiz series, I will see much better performance for you guys, because that is the sign that you have improved. Otherwise, most likely none of these questions may come in the exam, but it's the learning that has to happen for us. So the next question is, which of the following subjects are mentioned in the Union list of the 7th schedule of Constitution of India? Economic and social planning. See, common sense. Why would only Union do economic and social planning? Isn't it the job of the states as well? So both have to do it, right? So definitely this is not going to be in the Union list. It will be in the concurrent list, right? So not a surprise. Audit of the accounts of the Union and state. See, there is a common Comptroller and Auditor General of India whose provisions, etc., are made by an Act of Parliament. So a good guess would be that it is in the Union list, and it is in the Union list. Electricity, again, apply some common sense awareness of current affairs. Electricity has been such a major issue around in the news, where states keep fighting regarding GST on electricity and keeping it out of the purview of GST. So definitely states have a power over here. So if you see the three lists, it cannot be in the union list, because then the states will have no role to play. So electricity as a subject is in the concurrent list, while the taxes on electricity are in the state list. Okay. So anyway, this is not in the union list. And stock exchanges, well, I mean, it's just one of the options I thought you should know. This is in the union list. So 2 and 4 should be the correct answer for you. So we reached the last question of today's video, the Consumer Protection Act 2019. In the last video itself, ladies and gentlemen, I had told you that there is a new act which has replaced the 1986 act, okay, and I'd asked you read it. So if you've read it, you should be able to answer all these questions. Otherwise also, if you've gone through the test, you will answer, but read it. And it has replaced the 1986 act. I told you. Which of the following are a feature of the new act? I did post on the channel also a quick news snippet of the major differences, and I would recommend you prepare that, because I believe that is a likely area of questioning. But anyway, a consumer can file complaint only in a consumer court where the seller's office is located. Now see, this is the original provision. This is the 1986 provision. Now this has been removed. And now the provision says that the complainant can file the case in a consumer court where the complainant resides or works also, as well as of course where the seller is. So it can be the complainant's area as well. So and the other two statements, a consumer can seek compensation under product liability. Yes, this has been brought in. Earlier there was no provision. Consumers had to approach a civil court, but not the consumer courts. Now it is part of the act. Then e-commerce is also under the ambit of the new act. Yes, in 1986 nobody perhaps knew also properly what is e-commerce. Now all the rules of direct selling extend to e-commerce as well, after the new provisions have been made here. So I mean, these are not just the three differences, but these are three major differences. Other important aspect is that earlier there was no separate regulator. But now under the new act, there is a Central Consumer Protection Authority, the CCPA is to be formed, right? The Central Consumer Protection Authority. So there will be a regulator. So it's just a much better management, right? And also the pecuniary jurisdictions have been increased for the district and the state and the national level, courts that are established here. And also there is a concept of mediation now. Earlier there was no mediation. Anyway, please look at the article if you don't want to read in more detail on the act itself. So that's the 10 questions for today. And to end, I will leave you with 10 symbols of some religions of the world. And I will request, pause right now. See if you can identify all 10 of them. I think you should be able to identify at least 8 of them. And if you can't, then you go ahead. I have given all the answers also for you. You'll have to identify which one is which. So please have a look, and I will see you with 10 more questions very soon. Till then, study well. Thank you very much.